Okay, folks, we are looking at central nervous system today. There is a bullet, a red bullet you can read through. Okay, and you can see the different parts of what we've got to cover. Okay, the first part we want to talk about the skull and vertebrae. That protects the central nervous system. And around after that, you have this meninges, and the meninges is made up of three components. The hard mother, this is Latin, hard mother, dura mater. The arachnoid, which is going to make cerebral spinal fluid. And pia, as in piano, soft mother, right there. So when you get a concussion to hit yourself, okay, what happens is that you bruise the brain. You get the brain hitting against the skull. Cerebral spinal fluid is a shock absorber that the arachnoid makes, okay, and it's fluid that goes up and down your spine and circulates in your brain. We'll look at that in a second. So here goes. There's your skull, dura mater, pia mater. The blue is a cerebral spinal fluid. Notice how it bathes the brain in what's called these ventricles, these large areas here. And then it moves all the way down your spinal cord as well. Blood-brain barrier allows small molecules to move across into the neurons, like glucose. And glucose then nourishes the glial cells. It provides energy for the glial cells. And we know that the glial cells then support the neurons. And this image here, I think, is pretty amazing. It's all the blood vessels in the brain. So lots of glucose and oxygen gets shunted to the brain. So a huge percentage of the volume of your heartbeat goes to the brain. Very active. Okay, spinal cord. Different parts. We know that it carries nerve messages from the brain, relays a message from the brain to the effectors, and it's made up of unmyelinated and myelinated. The unmyelinated is the gray horns, we call them, and the the myelinated is the white matter on the outside. And you've got dorsal and ventral neurons as well on there. And you can see that here. There's the dorsal. And the dorsal is going to bring sensory impulse, and the ventral is going to carry the motor. And on this diagram here, we can see the meninges, the vertebrae, and the discs. What the discs do is they act as shock absorbers as well. Another diagram, don't memorize those things. It's just in your textbook for you to look at. And again, this is another diagram of the different parts there, what it actually looks like. Okay, the brain, three regions, forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. We want to look at all three. But before we do that, let's look at the cross-section of the brain. When people say use your gray matter, the gray matter is on the outside, and it's all this cerebral cortex on the outside. The white matter is on the inside. It's the reverse in your spinal cord. Gray is on the inside, white is on the outside. Okay, three areas: forebrain, midbrain, hindbrain. Forebrain contains the cerebrum, the largest portion of the brain, and the cerebral cortex, which we pointed out, is the gray matter, all the thinking, speech, reasoning, memory, personality, motor actions. And there's a bridge called the corpus callosum. Each hemisphere has four lobes: frontal, temporal, parietal, and spatial. The forebrain also has the thalamus, which is a motor relay sensory relays motor and sensory signals to the cortex. The hypothalamus pituitary and the olfactory bulbs are right about here, and they're used for smell. Much bigger, say, in dogs than humans. Hypothalamus pituitary, we're going to spend much more time talking about endocrine because this is the seat of the endocrine system. So it links the nerves to the blood of the endocrine system. Okay, so let's follow this here. Sensory neuron, dorsal root, up to the relay center of the thalamus that then says, you're going to sense pain here. okay, in the sensory cortex. The motor cortex, which is right next to it, okay, the parietal lobe, then sends the impulse via the ventral root, okay, lower motor neuron to the effector. And it switches, okay, switches from left over to right side. So the right side controls the left and vice versa. Cerebral lobes, frontal, voluntary muscles, walking, speech, personality, your executive functioning. Temporal, right by your ears, so it's for hearing, but also smell and, yeah, hearing. There we go. And parietal, okay, it includes the sensory cortex, which we just looked at, and all these other areas as well, okay? Speech, taste, and the occipital is vision. Huge area for vision in humans. Left and right center, left and right, okay, separated by the corpus callosum. Go through this here. The left brain is like Spock, okay, from, that show, Star Trek, okay? So it controls the right side of the body, number, math, analytical. Have you met people like that? Logic, reasoning, okay? Right side of the brain, this is the artsies. 3D shapes, music, awareness, synthesized subjective imagination, intuitive emotion. But here's the catch, music, okay, spatial awareness is very tied to math. So it's very difficult to strike a really strong causal relation saying someone's left brain or right brain. It's more complex than that. Okay, so we've talked a bit about the frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal lobes. Okay, look at what happens to a child with FAS, fetal alcohol syndrome. Fetal alcohol syndrome. Okay, um, they're missing all of the folding of the cerebrum. Now think about it. Humans are very smart, so they've got to cram a lot of gray matter into a small area to get past the birth canal. So it's done by all these gyri and folding, sulci and gyri, they're called, all the folding. Fetal alcohol syndrome, they are lacking that. Okay, so they're developmentally delayed mentally. Midbrain, forwardmost portion of the brain stem. There's the brain stem in blue, forwardmost portion. Important functions of motor movement, movement of eyes, auditory and visual processing, and other basic functions like sleep, wakefulness, alertness, temperature regulation. And it's interestingly an area where a lot of the neurotransmitter dopamine, which is your pleasure um, hormone neurotransmitter, is made. So this is a reward pathway. So here's a good way to understand this. Frontal cortex is high executive reasoning, right? Okay, and the midbrain is linked to pleasure and reward. So there's a relay center between these two, and a tug of war ensues. You go to a party and somebody says, "Here, have a drink." Okay, your executive reasoning says, maybe I shouldn't, but your midbrain goes, "Oh, I'll go for it." Okay, so and so with addictions, especially drug addictions, um, breaking the pathway between these two is the most difficult thing. That's why people go to alcohol AA meetings, because when they're at AA meetings, they're able to talk things out and give a lot of emotional support to break this. This link has become so strong between the two, it leads to an addiction. Hindbrain, cerebellum, motor movements, coordinates voluntary movements, posture, balance, speech, and coordination. So pick up a pencil in your hand and start writing something. Think about now how you're holding that pencil. Are you squeezing it really tight, too loose? Okay, how about a styrofoam cup of water? When you hold it in your hand and drink it, are you squeezing it so it crushes it, or are you letting it drop through? No, you're holding it just right. That's your cerebellum. Okay, if you were to do a cartwheel, okay, balance and coordination, your cerebellum. Okay, So it helps with all of that coordination. Pons is a relay center for the forebrain, okay, right here. Also involved, and so we've seen this. So tracks are going to come up, they're going to go to the midbrain, thalamus, and then it's going to start sending impulses to the cerebrum and vice versa. That's the relay center. Some involuntary functions. MO, the medulla oblongata, joins the spinal cord of the cerebellum. Involuntary nerve control, breathing movements, dimer blood vessels, blood pressure, vomiting, sneezing. Those are just some examples. Okay, interpreting speech. There's two areas. The Broca's area, okay, prefrontal cortex, okay. This allows you, and it links to the motor cortex, okay, and allows you to control movements of your mouth. Wernicke's is involved in understanding and processing speech and written language, and that's located in the temporal cortex. And both of those are linked to speech. So if you have a stroke on the left side of your brain, right here, stroke, you can't speak or you slur your speech. So just try this one here, the sour in the milk, the silk in the milk. Try that, and it helps you understand the differences between Broca's and Wernicke's, and ask yourself which one is being impaired or affected when you do that little experiment. Okay, brain mapping. This is fascinating. The frontal, okay, is sensory. The parietal lobe, this blue band of the parietal lobe, deals with sorry, this is sensory, and the frontal lobe is motor. So they can actually probe right here, touch different areas of the brain, and notice how much space is devoted to your face. Huge area of the cerebral cortex is devoted to moving your lips, a lot of coordination, but also sensation right there, a lot of sensations. Whereas your arm has very little area of the brain devoted to it for sensing things or motor movement. Fine coordination of your hand requires a lot of real estate area taken up in your brain for your hand. Now, what's interesting is that people that lose their eyesight, for example, become much more sensitive in their fingers for reading Braille. And so more area, they believe, of the brain is taken up for that. And how we learn about this is through EEG and positron emission tomography. So you can read through that. Okay, you can go through this one more time. Let's do a little quiz. Okay, cerebellum, coordination, right? Okay, medulla oblongata, join the brainstem to the spinal cord. The pons, relay center. Corpus callosum joins both sides of the hemispheres. Now we've got two left. Right here at the base, above the pons, is the midbrain. Okay. And then part of the forebrain is the thalamus. Okay, again, a relay center. And just below it here is your hypothalamus. Now, interesting of this, look at your eyeball. That's your optic nerve. Your optic nerve is a nerve, right? And that's going to detect impulses here to the occipital cortex for vision, frontal cortex, parietal, parietal, and this would be your temporal cortex. So occipital, um, frontal, parietal, and temporal cortex. And there's your cerebrum at the top. Okay, these are some great videos. Spend some time looking at these. They're really cool. Take the test. It's really cool. Um, Learn about Phineas Gage, absolutely fascinating case study. Brain mapping, a Canadian did it, 1950s. Amazing. You must watch this and watch it. It's phenomenal. These are worth it. You'll be thanking me. Okay, do this homework and we'll move on.